Hey, it's Joey with MacArt Studios, and your host here on why you should care about Web3, the show where each episode we give you a new reason to care about Web3. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about a huge reason to care about Web3, and that is identity management. I'm going to break down why we should care about identity management and how Web3 could be a great solution for it. And if you're ready, let's get started. All right, so identity management is a big deal because of identity theft and data ownership. We're going to talk first about identity theft. All right, in 2021, 1.4 million Americans were victims of identity theft. Identity theft has been on the rise basically for the last 2 decades since the internet debuted. And identity theft is a really expensive problem. Those 1.4 million Americans that were victims in 2021, that equaled $5.8 billion in losses. $5.8 billion in losses from identity theft. So how are people stealing our identities? How is that happening? It's websites, social media, sometimes phone calls, text messages, you name it. But a lot of the problem right now we're seeing is in sort of the digital ecosystem. You go to a website, you have to create a username and password. They want all this information about you. If you're trying to buy something, they might even want your credit card information. If you're trying to open a bank account or a trading account or get a job, you might have to even put even more personal information like your social security or your tax ID numbers, things like that into these companies' databases, basically. So all these websites, all these places that you're creating usernames and passwords or accounts with, they all have centralized databases that are in their control, that are up to them to keep safe, basically, right? So we have no say in what they do with our information or our data, but we also have no ability to keep it safe. It's literally in their database. So if that company or that site gets hacked, which happens all the time, all that information gets stolen. Even your employer databases that store a bunch of information about you, a bunch of personal information about you, they can be hacked. They are centralized databases that exist with a big red circle around them that says, I'm a target, come hack me, right? So those big centralized databases are big targets for hackers. That's a big problem. Hackers are also targeting us individually with scams and other things to click here and fill something out. Next thing you know, your identity is stolen. So how does Web3 help with that? Well, in Web3, instead of centralized databases that we have no say in, we have what's called the blockchain. And the blockchain is essentially a decentralized database that is public and transparent. So we have a wallet that can interact with that blockchain, that public database, and our wallet and that blockchain together can store information about us in an encrypted and safe way that we are completely in control of. So instead of going to a site and having to fill out a bunch of information and say, oh, I'm Joey Crony and here's all my data and my address and my email and my personal identifying information, I can just use my Web3 wallet to log into that site. That site or that company, instead of checking their own centralized database the way they do it today, can simply just check the blockchain and confirm that I am who I say I am, and whatever other information that I'm allowing them to access, they can access. So they don't need to store information on this. The blockchain essentially becomes a single decentralized repository of information that we have control of, that all these other companies and websites could use to access to verify our identity. They just choose not to. So that's a big deal, and a big way that Web3 can solve that. The other problem that I talked about in identity management is data ownership. So data ownership is a big deal because of people profiting off of our data and our identity. So in Web3, that becomes a lot more difficult / near impossible for them to do. But in today's world, if you go to social media sites, for example, and you create a username and password, not only are you creating that username and password, which in and of itself is an identity theft risk, but you're also giving them permission to sell your data. So all your activity on that site, all the things you liked or didn't like, all the comments you made, all the personal messages you've exchanged with your friends or folks on the site, all of that is data that they can anonymize and sell and basically profit a ton of money off of you and your activity. We have no say in whether they do that. We have no ability to participate in those transactions or in that revenue exchange if they do sell our data. That is a big, big deal. We are the product again. So we need to stop being the product. We need Web3 because we deserve and are entitled to data ownership and identity ownership. We are entitled to that and deserve that. And in the world that we live in today, it's impossible. So we need Web3 to help the individual, to help us protect our identities, to help us reclaim ownership of our data, and to help us stop being the product for Web2 landlords. So that is a huge reason to care about Web3. I hope you found this video helpful or useful. Please consider subscribing to our channels and sharing it if you did. I'm Joey with MacArt, and we'll see you next time on why you should care about Web3. Thanks.